Well, happy Friday, everyone. This is a special
Indeed.
Friday. We are on the eve of our 10th anniversary celebration of gathering on the Vineyard. And for the past couple of months, we've been on a road, and it's been a journey talking to leaders and experts from various backgrounds. But today I'm so excited because this conversation I think is so important. It's a conversation about connecting the African diaspora. I have one of my favorite people, my mentor, Kobe Appenting, with us this afternoon, and Maura McLean, both with AAI. Welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, it's great to be here, Crystal.
Good.
Thank you.
So we can start here and talk a little bit about how the events of this past year with the global pandemic, with the social pandemic, how have those events impacted the work of AAI?
I think, Maura, why don't you take that question as our historian?
Okay.
Well, the combination of what many are calling a racial reckoning, the social media spectacle of gratuitous police violence, and the disproportionate impact on the suffering of people of color due to the pandemic, or, focusing on the United States, the denial of some basic components of citizenship have reaffirmed the relevance of AI's 70-year mission, focus on education and its liberatory potential. And so I think that has inspired us to refocus on education now below the undergraduate level. So throughout AI's existence, there's been a focus on the academy, on advanced academic and professional training. And we had a period during the 70s when we focused on what in the United States is called K through 12, what in other parts of the world is primary and secondary education. And so these events have underscored for us the importance of focusing at the primary and secondary level, where as early as possible you can reach young people and what they know, what they think they know, and how they know.
Excellent. Kofi, how do you see this new focus sort of impacting the next generation? Now that you're focusing younger, how do you see this impacting this generation?
Sorry, the chimes are my clock here.
That's okay.
So one of the reasons that we focused on K through 12 is because we wanted to change the way that young people, especially children of the global African diaspora, get to learn about Africa and the diaspora. In most curricula, you start to learn about Africa because it's being colonized, or there's the slave trade has begun. And you don't understand how from the very beginning of human existence, which started in Africa, and continuously, without a break, through today, that members of the global African diaspora have been really important contributors to where we are today in the modern world, and many of the reasons that we're inspired to try to improve conditions in the modern world. And we think it's important for all kids, but especially our kids
Mhm.
to know where they fit in the world.
Beautiful. So tell me, I know you started doing lots of work in Detroit, and that's been going very well. What do you hope to accomplish in both sort of like short term and long term? What are your goals? Do you plan to expand to other cities? Are you looking for new partners? What are your plans?
Mm-hmm. Maura, do you want to start with that, and I'm happy to add anything afterwards.
Well, we're working. I'll begin at the big picture level, and this just dovetails with our preceding responses. To expose children to the full breadth of human contributions
Mhm.
is the immediate task. There's a wealth of really good, of superb academic scholarship on the complex histories of Africa in ancient and medieval times, the dispersion of people from the African continent to every other zone of human interaction, whether it's the Americas and the so-called Atlantic world, Asia, Europe, or the Indian Ocean basin, rather. The problem is that scholarly based knowledge rarely makes its way into K through 12. And so the immediate goal is to work with schools and school districts that have a recognition that this erasure of Africa is a serious problem, is to work with them in a very hands-on way to help them realize their own goals, to one, get away from the practice of introducing young people to Africa within frameworks of enslavement and colonization, and two, very importantly, support high student academic achievement. So what I always say is this is not a feel-good exercise. This is an exercise, an exciting journey of critical inquiry, of getting young people excited about seeing themselves in the creation of the modern world, and supporting their teachers, their parents, and their communities, and young people themselves in achieving academically.
Beautiful. Love that. I absolutely love that. Kofi, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I think that Maura really has kind of put a finger on what's kind of exciting for me about this, is that our schools have been challenged in reaching many of our children. And that these are complicated issues, but we're hoping that by making the curriculum more relevant, more engaging, and also by focusing on the best ways to really support learning, that we're going to see K through 12 kids really enjoying school and getting engaged with school, and that this is going to be something additive, right, to what they're doing. We're not claiming it's the silver bullet. We don't think there is one, but it's something we think we can do that can be part of kind of helping kids really get a much better sense of how they fit in the world, which is really important to your mental health and just your sense of belonging. And I think in the longer term, I think all of us, no matter where we're from, are going to be able to find kind of those connections that we have with each other, that we're not all so different, and that we've been interacting with each other in complex and really interesting ways, and that this is something that can help us have that next generation really help us find our way, because it's very clear that there are lots of things that we could be doing better, and we've been exhausting our planet, and we have been dividing ourselves over all kinds of things, and I think part of it comes from not really understanding how connected we all are. So longer term, I think that's our hope, and we think it's important to stick with that work. And as Maura mentioned, our founders understood this. These were members of the African diaspora that were, we now call African Americans, that looked at the world and saw how important it was to build those bridges among themselves and with people on the African continent, and with people in communities here, the world, who were all striving to make the world work better for all of us.
Awesome. I have to share this story. When I first met Kofi, I was sort of struck by his analysis more of our connection. And rarely do people make the connection between the civil rights era and the advantage it has, how it's opened doors for immigrants in the United States. And so I've been struck by that. And I think that this work, people will not have to be my age. I feel like younger people will be able to make this connection much earlier. So I'm very excited about that. Anything new and exciting coming up? I think there's with the way the world is set up now, everything's always a little unpredictable, but I think September is a big month for AAI, Kofi, isn't it?
Yes, every September, during the time when the United Nations General Assembly is occurring, which will be a hybrid event for the UN, but will be completely virtual for us. We always take that occasion to shine a light on genuine achievement that has come, that emanates from the global, worldwide African diaspora. And we're going to be doing that on September 21st. And we're going to be talking about the contributions to democracy that the people of Malawi have made. It's a remarkable story, but it's not well known. It's a relatively small country with a small population, but it's an extraordinary population that has persevered and made their voices heard. And I think it's quite instructive as we all are reflecting on what's democracy today. There are people who are really part of that conversation and are showing leadership and courage and working on it every day. And we're also going to be talking about how the African continent's been dealing not only with the pandemic, but with public health. And we're going to be shining a light on some of the people who, despite all odds, are really making progress in creating what we think is the promise of a better tomorrow. Like we think there have been some genuine gains that come out of what's been a horrible global crisis.
It's been a rough patch, Maura, anything you'd like to share in closing?
Yes, your comment about the ways in which more recent immigrants, Black immigrants, and I would add that they are not now part of that ever evolving definition of African diaspora.
Yes.
How, the civil rights movement has benefited them. It is also true that as a historical matter, the global liberation struggles of the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, and during the latter part of that, during which African Americans said to the United States, which was then an emergent global superpower, how can you say to the rest of the world that you deserve to lead when you treat your own citizens in a way that denies them their humanity and their basic rights? So in fact, the global decolonization movements, including African freedom fighters, was part of what made the civil rights legislation of the 1960s politically palatable, because there were even the State Department and organizations typically involved in the international realm filed amicus briefs in the Brown decision, for instance, saying, this is not good for the United States image. 54 was just a few years away from Ghana's independence. So this is a very, very long series of connections, which in some ways were more deep than they are now that we have social media. So it's very exciting to be able to reignite them. And then the last thing I guess I will say is picking up on Kofi's comments about what we've done to the planet. Long-term, really long-term, our hope is that this will inspire that people in the diaspora will be part of a movement that redefines what progress means.
Yes.
To mean away from, money and profits and things, to human being for humans and all other creatures and the planet Earth.
Wonderful. I could talk to the two of you forever. I can't wait until we can spend time together face to face. I think we'll need a weekend. I'll just sit at your feet and absorb all of this knowledge. But I am beyond thrilled and humbled to be a part of what we are building collectively at AAI. And thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you for having us, Crystal.
Thank you.
Always my pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so next up, we have the talented, brilliant Amira Rasul. Are you there, Amira?
I am. How are you?
I am wonderful and so happy to have this time with you. Where are you today physically? Or are you on the continent? Did I hear that? Or are you in the United States?
I'm in the US. I'm in New York currently.
Oh, okay. And I'm assuming busy.
A little bit.
Just a tad bit.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us. If you'd like to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you are building, because I'm very fascinated.
Sure, yes. So my name is Amira Rasul. I'm the founder and CEO of The Folklore. We're an e-commerce platform that focuses on selling luxury and emerging designer brands from Africa and the diaspora. So you can find us at www.thefolklore.com.
Awesome. So I want to jump right in. My first question is, how has your connection to the continent inspired your work? Like when I look at what you're doing, I'd like for people to know, how has that been such a part of the work you're doing? How has it inspired you?
Yeah, so I actually did not take my first step on the continent until I was 20 years old.
Wow.
So yes, I went to, my first trip was in South Africa. and it was inspired by my studies. I went to Rutgers undergrad, and I was an African-American African studies major, and that's when I became, and that's kind of the first time I started learning about my own people and my ancestors that are from the continent. And so that really inspired me to want to connect with it more. And so I took that first trip out there, and that's really what inspired the folklore, being able to, feel at home, connect with people, and see how much promise was there, and understanding that, I have a lot that I can offer, and they can offer so much to me. Like, how do we collaborate? And that was really like an eye-opening moment for me, and that definitely changed the course of my career. Before then, I wanted to be like the editor-in-chief of Vogue, and I wanted to be in this cool like magazine space. And when I got there, I was like, I have a bigger purpose, and it involves me being here and doing something here.
Wow. Well, I don't feel like, you really missed a beat. Vogue is okay, but what you're building, I think, is pretty special.
Yes.
Tell me, I call it purpose driven, right?
Yep.
What made you choose fashion and luxury goods, sort of like as your focus from a business perspective? What went into that?
From a business perspective, I was always really into fashion. I was first into architecture, but I wasn't great at math. So then I got into fashion. So then, once I was in fashion, I was in the publishing space, and I knew how to tell stories well, either through visuals or through written word. And so I knew that I would be able to create a business that I would need to be able to use those skills of being able to tell stories. And I thought retail would be a really good way to do that. One, because commerce is what makes the world go around.
Yep.
So that would definitely help to economically empower, our people. And then two, like, it's something that will allow me to travel. It's something that will allow me to be creative and work with people around the world, build relationships. So that's really the thing that really, got me into the fashion and luxury game on the retail side.
I spend most of my time on Instagram actually following African designers and designers of the diaspora that are global, and the talent and skills is just amazing. So I'm so happy. Yeah, it's like incredible. So I'm so happy that you are using, your platform to sort of provide, I would say, eyeballs in this sense, right? To some really, really talented individuals. So kudos to you for doing that. I have to ask you this question though, as an entrepreneur and as an African female entrepreneur, what has that journey been like? I mean, I'd love to hear what your journey has been like from concept to fundraising. What's your journey been like?
It's been really difficult, but I do acknowledge that I had a leg up, because I did come from a background where like I had my family who could support me. I was able to work for a year and go out and launch this. So whereas like most of our community, we don't come from a situation where that happened. So I do always like to acknowledge, like, I was put in a position where like I could come home, stay home, and then be that entrepreneur who's taken no paycheck for, 3 years. And most of us can't do that. Most of us would then have to have another job on top of that, So, that's really like I think the reality for most Black women in particular who are going through this. For me, it was still difficult because when it comes to raising money, my family doesn't come from a venture capital background. So I was gonna have to find my network and make that network myself. And then also trying to convince people that what we're doing is valuable. For so long, there's been such a negative connotation attached to Africa. And so when they hear African fashion, they only think of it, as certain prints, and like that it could only be worn by Black people. And that, so really having to fight through ignorance has been something that, when you have a company like this, where you're telling, investors that you need to bet on Black people, it's still hard for them. There's unconscious bias there. So having to overcome that and continuously, like, have those microaggressions, and, that's difficult. But just running a business in general is difficult. And then when you add on being a Black woman, it doesn't make it much easier.
Super complicated. So are you currently fundraising?
We're not actively fundraising, but
Okay. Hey, I was going to say, listen, let's get a little pitch going right now.
I mean, we always have conversations with investors. We always like to be able to talk to investors, but we're not actively fundraising right now.
No, I too can relate to your story of, if having a family that could support me, I would not have been able to pursue sort of what I felt was my passion. So ditto. I know that story well. Well, what advice would you give some young person listening to you? Because I've run across several throughout the diaspora that want to use their talents or create a business to connect. And, what advice would you give them? You said it's definitely not easy, but if there's a young person listening, what are some of the things that you've learned maybe that you wish you'd known when you started?
You can't plan for the unexpected, so you have to be able to pivot.
Mm-hmm.
So, be able to not take a lot of things personally, just be able to give yourself a pep talk. Like you have time to be able to be a little sad, but then you have to give yourself a pep talk and go at it. If you have done your due diligence and you've done enough research where you know that what you're doing is going to make a difference, then don't let doubt get in the way. And then I would say another thing is you need to be where your audience is, or where your collaborators are. So I think the most important thing, and the thing that's led to our success, is me being on the ground to start this business, because I was born and raised in the US. So for me to try to start a company like this with little to no direct connection to the continent, it would have been very difficult. So I think it's important to be where your customer is, and to also be where your partners are in order to get into it. Twice as much as you think you're going to need.
Twice as much as you think. And then I just have to ask you this last question though. How is the pandemic, right? How's this, because it's a global pandemic that seems to keep evolving, right? How is this impacting your business and your work? Like, how are you, because you said pivot, so that tells me you've been pivoting this last year. So how are you doing, or how are you making these pivots?
I just have to sit back sometimes. So I always give myself some time to think, and really look at it from a perspective of what's the worst case scenario, best case scenario, and what's realistic, and kind of be able to really tap into mentors to be able to present those ideas. So that's one thing that I'm really big about, is coming up with an idea, but not ever executing without really running it by not only my mentors or investors, but the team as well. So we've now built a team where we have, full-time members, and, I'm part of the way that they're able to pay their bills. So I also want to make sure that I'm being responsible as running things by our team. So if we see okay, this is going to be a big problem because of the pandemic, what do you guys think we should do? And then take those three kind of those three scenarios, and then be able to really unpack them. And so just taking a step back is really important.
Wow. Well, I'm looking forward to building with you. And, I think what you're doing is, I call it sort of like the product of what AAI has been building for so long now, right? And inspiring and motivating. But I think as we begin to help young people see themselves differently, I also think we can inspire more to pursue the path of entrepreneurship, and in a global way. Amazing to have global entrepreneurs. Amira, thank you so much for your time and for sharing, and looking forward to partnering with you in the near future. So one last thing. So I like what you said. You give yourself a moment to be disappointed, right? When it's difficult, and then you keep going. So thank you for sharing that. I have a rule of thumb. I say, okay, after 72 hours, it's time to get up, shift, and keep moving. So kudos to you, and looking forward to building with you in the future. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate the opportunity.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, we're excited about our road to the Vineyard. I am excited about connecting with many of you over the next couple of days, and in the future, sharing more with you about AAI and the work that young people like Amira's doing. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.